Remember when Idiocracy was a funny and wild movie, not a future prediction?
George Carlin was one of the greatest comedians to ever live. His laser-focused rants exposed the stupidity and hypocrisy of his time. The world is ever poorer for losing out on the jokes he could have come up with using the past 16 years of material. But even though he isn't here today, what he accomplished still proves he was far ahead of his time. The topic
I remember this dude.
he ranted about, the vices he exposed, and the points he made are even more relevant today than they were when he was alive.
They got you by the balls.
So let's explore the aspects of society that George Carlin's jokes try to warn us of.
The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. Or they depopulate the area. The government doesn't lie, it engages in disinformation. Contra killers are called freedom fighters. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight?
It's undeniable that George Carlin was a
I remember that one.
master comedian. He completely ignored the lines that both regular people and other comedians were too scared to cross. His first special, which brought him to fame, famously
Comedy dies when people are afraid to cross lines.
relied on the 7 dirty words that didn't let people say on television. While we're used to cursing today, it was revolutionary for the time. George even got arrested in 1972 for performing the act. It wasn't just there for the sake of it though. Underneath the shock value, each of George Carlin's bits were examples of his own personal philosophy of common sense.
Ass is all right on television. You can say on television things like, well, you've made a perfect ass of yourself tonight. But you can't say, hey, let's go get some ass.
What made Carlin such a great comedian was his ability to step back from the cultural and social norms that shaped everyone else's thinking. Instead of just buying into what everyone else was saying, he created his own unique view of the world. Carlin would cut right to the bone, hitting the core of whatever topic he chose. It came from reducing concepts to their simplest form. Regardless of who was pushing it, whether it was a right-wing issue or a left-wing talking point, it didn't matter. George Carlin would strip away the lies people tell themselves and show the real purpose behind it. He attacked the left for their attempts to control language and the political correctness that bogged down their actually worthwhile beliefs. But just after he finished those runs, he gets straight into attacking the religious fervor of the right and their relationship with corporate power. It was this ability to strip away the nonsense that turned him into a modern day prophet.
My relationship with corporate power nowadays is, pretty much a left thing. They are kind of what big businesses, big pharmas, and all of that stuff. Except McDonald's. They're boycotting McDonald's because of Palestine.
He knew what the actual reasons were for America and the world's vices, so he naturally knew where they'd lead. And as we go forward, we're going to expose tons of the things that he tried to warn us about. But one of his last predictions is perhaps the most concerning one of all. In an interview taken shortly before his death in June of 2008, he said this, quote, "We're circling the drain right now. Nero is playing his violin. It's all over for America. I can see an out-of-control pandemic wreaking havoc in the country and around the world." George Carlin often used illness and disease as a metaphor, especially in his special titled "You Are All Deceased." But it's eerie how just 12 years later, his prediction of a worldwide destructive epidemic would actually come true. It was something that sped up the clock on his other predictions as well. As for
I don't like these type of predictions. It's the same type of prediction as saying that, hey, if you constantly only walk in these shoes, you're gonna find love, you're gonna find happiness. Because at some point, if you are gonna wear those shoes for the rest of your life every single day, yeah, you're probably gonna, if you're gonna find love and you're gonna find happiness, the prediction is true. It's not that deep. And I don't like when, someone just says something random. Oh, one day we're all gonna die in war. Yeah. And then 200 years later, if it happens, oh, he was right. I don't like these kind of predictions. They're cheap.
For his comments on America, if they haven't already come true, then they're not very far away. So let's explore what else he foresaw for the doomed country. You're being watched. Big Tech is tracking your phone and email to know what you do online. This is because your personal information, we're talking information on family members, mailing address, SSN, bank credentials. One of George Carlin's most famous rants, taken from his 2005 stand-up special, is a collection of these premonitions about America. It really needs to be listened to in full, as each one is more accurate than the last. First, he starts with saying that America has just become one large shopping mall.
And turned it into what it is today, a shopping mall. A big fucking shopping mall.
He talks about how
Pretty accurate.
Everywhere, turning a once beautiful country into a consumerist nightmare. At first, it seems like this is one observation that's actually less true today. Malls are dying off and they have been for years, but it's only because we don't need them anymore. The cycle of an ever-increasing amount of malls and opportunities to consume that George Carlin foresaw has actually been completed, because today, everyone has their own personal mall in their pocket. Whatever you want to buy is just a few seconds away. You don't even need to leave the house anymore.
This is true, and people did predict that America is turning into a giant shopping mall 20, 30 years ago, but no one... These predictions are just flat out wrong, because they predicted it based off the fact that everyone does go to a mall and whatnot, you know? Those American TV programs, soaps and whatnot, where the kids are always at the mall, you know, that type of stuff. That died out. No one predicted that you're gonna have a shopping mall in your phone and that Amazon is gonna deliver everything to you cheaply. Okay? No one predicted that. They didn't predict it. You didn't predict it. I didn't predict that. You know, again, it's kind of right, because, you know, everything now is a giant shopping mall, because that is the future just that we are going for, that it's just consume until the end of time. But again, not exactly what I would actually call an accurate prediction.
It's truly the next stage of what George Carlin talks about next: America's addiction to shopping and eating.
Shopping and eating, especially eating. Americans love to eat.
Since he said this in 2005, we've only seen things.
Most countries like to eat. Honestly, America is not that super special when it does come to eating. It's the difference, I guess, that what we are eating, because the American, what are they called? The FDA, Food Safety Department, Food and Drug and Food Drug whatever the department. You know the one I'm talking about. Yeah, they allow Americans to eat a lot of things that is considered a health hazard, a serious health hazard in Europe. There is a difference. Though Europe's also getting fatter.
Get worse. Obesity rates have gone up nearly a third, reaching around 42% in 2020. While it wasn't hard to imagine that America would keep getting fatter, it still matches up with the reason that George Carlin gave for it. Now that the mall follows us around each day, people have been able to get even further into their addiction to consuming stuff.
I think one of the big things that actually ruins health and, you know, makes you fat is that at this point it has to be just bread. Bread is insane, okay? Listen. That yesterday, you know what I ate? 2 eggs and 2 pieces of bread. A little bit of cheese on the eggs, you know, cooked. And that was my breakfast. And then I had lunch. 2 eggs and no cheese this time, and 3 pieces of bread. And I had like a this large thing of potato chips. It's like, it's not really potato chips. It's mashed potatoes in a thing. It's pretty good, but it's also relatively small. But you know, it's essentially just bread and potatoes. And I gained 0.5 pounds from yesterday. The hell! I didn't drink anything special. I drank 1 glass of Coke and water and black tea. That's it. The hell! And it's literally all from bread. Not even, by the way, blaming the potato chips. Not even doing that. It's literally just from the bread.
This rate by 2030 will nearly be a 50% obesity. Half of the USA will be so addicted to food and the additives and hormones they add into this food that the population won't be able to control themselves. The techniques they've developed to create and feed this addiction have reached new heights, and the people afflicted by it have sunk to new lows. What about the other kind of consumption that George Carlin talked about, buying stuff? As he puts it, Americans are addicted to spending money they don't have on things they don't need.
Buying things. People spending money they don't have on things they don't need.
As you can imagine, both.
It's what poor people do. Every single place you see people who are making minimum wage, or sometimes even below minimum wage, or something close to like minimum wage, and what do? They buy expensive fucking shit. They buy expensive food, they buy expensive drinks, they buy expensive clothes, they buy all of the things that you should not buy because you're poor. And then they are poor and they're like scratching their hands, what happened?
Both of these vices have only gotten more widespread. The app
Admittedly, in America, it's way worse, because in America, it is not uncommon, from what I have seen and heard, that, you know, there comes out some kind of new sneaker, some kind of Air Force, or I don't know, what I don't know the brands. Okay, listen, I buy cheap shit. I don't know the brands, but and you hear that poor people literally are getting loans to buy their new Jordans, Yeezys, or, you know, if Air, whatever they're called, okay? Taking out a loan to buy a pair of sneakers, you're probably gonna get robbed in 3 days and get stolen from you. It's not smart.
Temu is a great example of this. It specializes in selling as much stuff as physically possible, giving their customers the instant satisfaction of consumption. It's nearly all stuff that you don't need, that will just be taking up space in a landfill sooner or later. As for how they're paying for all of it, people are using so-called buy now pay later schemes. It's forecasted that in 2024, over 93 million people in America will use this kind of borrowing, over 10% more than the year before. It's the next development in what George Carlin saw.
Avoid any borrowing of money ever. It's just made to make you poor.
Nearly every single online retailer has built it directly into their website. It's not money that people generally have. 56% of the people using these services have had problems with late repayments. The addictions that modern society pushes on people and their inability to resist them has bled them dry. The core of all of this that George Carlin identifies is how stupid America has made its people. They've been willingly duped into living this way, and it makes everybody dumber. Then he moves on to education as the solution that people always bring up. It's so clear that it's failing that when the next year of kids is dumber and pays less attention, they just lower the passing grades. This is what we saw in 2005, and it's only gotten so much worse in 2024. The pandemic showed us how bad things have really gotten with kids. Instead of lowering grade boundaries, they removed them entirely. There weren't any checks on whether kids were actually doing their work at home, so most didn't even bother. The consequences came fast. Across nearly every single state, math scores went down during the pandemic. Only a
math scores are going down everywhere in the world.
quarter of 8th graders were up to the minimum standards, down 8% from the year before.
Admittedly, you know, as far as I'm concerned, American education is going down way faster.
Speak to any teacher and you'll get the same answer. Kids have only gotten more distracted and less engaged. They don't listen in class anymore and they can barely sit still for 5 minutes.
Wait, I have seen 2 out of the 3 of these videos.
I teach 7th grade, they are still performing on the 4th grade level.
Apparently 2 years of no school and non-stop TikTok reels will do that. It's not that the funding for education in the US is anywhere near sufficient today, but even fixing that would only marginally balance out what's happened to the next generation. It can't stand up to the pressure of instant entertainment and instant consumption. The same things that are making adults dumber today are affecting the kids even more. None of these things that George Carlin foresaw were really that complicated. The evidence is right there, in our faces every day. But the loss of critical thinking has made it so people just can't see it anymore. It takes comedians and philosophers to unravel it all, and George Carlin was both. At the end of
This is what Joe Rogan said, I remember, that the modern day smart people are comedians. People are lining up to hear what comedians have to say about the world and what's right and what's wrong at this point.
After this, George reveals the reason for this increasing stupidity at the heart of America. The people who are really in power want it this way. They want people that will consume more and question less.
They don't want a population of citizens capable of...
Now, the funny part about the people in power is how fucking stupid they also are. Because you know what's the biggest fallacy of these people who want to make the world stupider so it's easier to control and all of these things? They fucking just magically assume that their kids, who are already dying from being cooked on heroin from the ripe old age of 11, are gonna be immune to the same propaganda you spew. No, they're not. Hey, immigration is good now is also popular there with the kids. Initially, they just thought this is gonna be fun. It's just gonna be Europe and America and that. Those kids are gonna eat this shit up. Our kids? Oh, wait, our kids are also pro-immigration. How did this happen? There's no saving from that. You can't guarantee that your kid is gonna be smart. You can't guarantee your kid is gonna be good or whatever, especially if they are born with all the resources and absolutely none of the consequences in the world. Because humans just crave for experiences. When it comes to humans and how we want to spend our pastime, we just crave for experiences. It doesn't matter how basic, as long as it's new, as long as it's something. And when you have all the resources, well, those cravings get really, really intense, okay? For me, for you, the cravings are simple. There's a stopgap, there's a limiter, there's money. We don't have it. They do? So now their only limitation is pretty much just ethic boundaries.
Of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers.
Again, it's something that's only gone further since then. People buy into the two-party system more feverishly and enthusiastically than ever, getting duped into blaming each other rather than the people who actually make the real decisions. He summarizes their aims with a simple statement: they want more for themselves and less for everybody else.
Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else.
And it's exactly what they got. Today, the top 10% of the country holds over 2/3 of the wealth, and the poor half of the country only have a measly 2.5% of the total wealth. On the other hand, the wealth of billionaires nearly doubled over the past 4 years alone.
You know what's my favorite thing in the world? It's the fact that these people are clearly poor, but she's also fucking fat at the same time. That is so wild. That is so wild.
The past 4 years alone. It's exactly what he predicted happening in exactly the way he predicted it. The staggering thing is that all of these correct predictions came from just 11 minutes of one of his stand-up specials. It's a message that's both illuminating and depressing, like the truth often is. His rants work because they're true and because they're timeless. The things he says are so true and seem so obvious once we hear them, that it's enough to take us over the lines he crossed. Even just reading his words to yourself would be enough, but it's George Carlin's delivery that really makes it. The bits that most people have seen, his latest specials for HBO, are the result of decades of work creating and evolving his own style. Carlin didn't start out as a voice of the counterculture, challenging the contradictions within society. In fact, in the 1960s, he was actually a pretty standard radio host. For the first few decades of his career, most of his jokes were just observations without any social commentary. He perfected the basics before he used them to create his own style, and that's where his excellent flow comes from. It's how the exact right words just come tumbling effortlessly out of his mouth. He knew when he needed to repeat a phrase for emphasis, or reword the same point a few times for maximum effect. His excellent choice of sharp, simple words also helped as well. It made his rants much more effective in delivering their common sense message. Even later on in his career though, there were still a decent amount of straight jokes and silly routines mixed in. He could be dropping bombs in one sentence then move on to something completely mundane a minute later. It helped package the philosophy into something that regular people could appreciate. What's more effective? The message that reaches 100 people or 10 million. Today, both the right wing and the left constantly try to claim George Carlin as one of their own. His reputation for common sense is so strong that
no one does that as much as I know. Huh.
there's an endless amount of random quotes and points that have been made up and attributed to him. In reality, Carlin wasn't a follower of either ideology. He transcended two-party politics. He only followed his own thoughts and opinions. And the result of this, as he said, was that he probably ended up slightly left of center.
Well, I consider the whole country, to be one large political party with two wings. And I'm out of step with both wings, but on some issues, I come closer to the left wing.
It meant that he could turn his razor-sharp focus onto both sides of the spectrum, pointing out the contradictions and stupidity within the narrow views of life. His criticism of the left, for example, would once again show his prophetic insight. All of the problems he saw would only get worse after his death. George Carlin often talked about language, and this was one of the ways the left has really come up short. One of his best bits comes from his observations about soft language. He noticed how words have been changed over time, with each generation, to take the impact out of them. Shell shock from the First War became battle fatigue after that, and eventually ended up as post-traumatic stress disorder. While
Huh. Battle fatigue, I didn't even hear about that one, huh?
might be more medically accurate, it loses the instant meaning that shell shock conveys. This itself has only gotten worse. Those in power do this all the time. When an enemy country kills people, they've murdered civilians. When one of our allies or we do it, people have died after something happened. The intentionality and the blame is often completely taken out of it. This softening and manipulation of language has found its home inevitably in the corporate world. They've turned it into an art form and taken it past just obscuring the meaning of things. You can create whole sentences out of corporate jargon that actually means absolutely nothing. The left gets so caught up in these language games, as Carlin described in his 1990 show Doing It Again, that they lose sight of what really matters.
We were using that soft language, that language that takes the life out of life. And it is a function of time. It does keep getting worse.
Instead of actually following their own beliefs and fighting for justice, they make people change their language so that the world sounds more equal than it really is. In his time, it was about changing gendered words to sound more neutral. A policeman would become a police officer, a spokesman would become a spokesperson. Today, this too has been taken a step further. It's all about politics.
Oh, yeah.
Will become a spokesperson. Today, this too has been taken a step further. It's all about politics and appearances. We've gotten to the point that the left makes more of a fuss over the demographics of Oscar winners than they do about people's rights and freedoms. While George Carlin obviously leaned left in lots of his beliefs, he was clearly disenchanted with how they were evolving over time, making him disenfranchised with the entire political system of America. You see, George Carlin was probably one of the most pro-free speech people to ever walk the earth.
How can you defend the use of words like this on broadcasting stations? Well, you don't have to defend them, I don't think. They are protected by the First Amendment, by free speech, just as in newspapers and books and in films. The broadcast media should be no different.
He spent his life pushing the boundaries and fighting for its place in society. It began with his first comedy special that put him in the national spotlight. 7 Dirty Words eventually led to a Supreme Court case after an uncensored version found its way onto daytime radio. It wasn't just culturally impactful, it was the heart of a legal debate over free speech. It was a struggle that George Carlin would continue until the end of his career, but all those he aligned with politically weren't as devoted to the fight. Instead, it seemed at the time more comedians, more people in Hollywood, were obsessed with sugarcoating offense, and soft language overshadowed it completely. As he said in Doing It Again, language and speech is entirely based on context.
Well, to be fair, there's also the opposite. If you ask what is better, the language 50 years ago or now, I would argue it's probably 50 years ago. Yeah, sure, the people did not use a lot of words before that, but, well, is it good now that everyone in the modern age, especially kids, says like after like every like sentence like that like? No, that's just called being retarded. Is it good that people use fuck after every single word that they say? Absolutely, obviously not. You dumb down the language, you destroy humanity. I have been saying this for a very long time. There is no way to actually convey complex ideas, beliefs, concepts, if everyone's so dumb that these complex words don't exist. Physics don't exist in a dumbed down language world because there's simply just no words that describe things. And that's a problem.
Philosophically, I do not buy the assumption that these words are somehow immoral or indecent in and of themselves. Words are only symbols, and they do not possess those qualities. People can be immoral or indecent. The words themselves cannot harm us.
It's the meanings behind the words that matter, not the words themselves. Tons of Carlin's routines would put him in very hot water today, because people would fail to see the context. You can see the effects of this today. Free speech has become a right-wing issue, if it's even mentioned at all. And yet it should be a fundamental value. This isn't to do with left or right politics at all. This is to do with the bedrock of Western civilization. And the fact that this isn't anymore has put society on a very dark path. What George Carlin warned us about here has already
This picture right here, do you want to bet this is from some kind of fucking shitty, what's it called, German feminist rally against something that no one cares about? I can bet you it 100% is.
Has put society on a very dark path. What George Carlin warned us about here has already started. We've allowed corporate bodies to censor language and change what people are saying. Look at what's happening on sites like TikTok or even here on YouTube. Even words that aren't curses but just refer to something bad or offensive are banned. We've had countless issues on this channel with having to censor the most milquetoast stuff imaginable. Nobody would ever say unalive if they weren't weren't forced to. Now you might think this wasn't politically motivated, but the pandemic proved some of this wrong. You couldn't even mention it or the Wuhan lab without the fact-check police popping up to make sure everyone had to read the relevant Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
And if you mentioned anything else about it, you could have your entire
And then magically it somehow turns out that the relevant Wikipedia page is full of lies. Wow. Turns out all of the people telling you what to do didn't actually do any science behind it. Again, everything that pretty much has been said was incorrect. Masks don't work. Ventilators actually made the situation worse for patients. Almost all of it has been 100% incorrect. And the hilarious part is these people didn't even actually try to test anything. They just fucking told you that this is what you should do. And there you go.
a YouTube channel wiped from the platform, and it was the same on every other social media site. George Carlin often talked about the ways they control people. From the media to the elections, the whole system is meant to give the illusion of control while keeping power in the hands of the
Bro, now that Kamala Harris is running, it is crazy. The leftists instantaneously went from Joe, my God, to Kamala now is the God. Oh, look, Joe's age is not an issue. Now Kamala is running and she's younger than Trump. Oh, look, age is an issue suddenly. It is crazy. And the best part? Who the fuck voted for Kamala? No one. She just gets the nomination. Why? Because reasons. That's it. There you go. Have fun.
few. As he predicted, they've only gotten greedier and more controlling since. Modern technology has allowed them to directly interfere with and manipulate speech and discourse between people. As the creation of words like unalive proves though, the truth always exists outside of their reach. In China, one of the biggest modern protests was just a plain white flag on all social media platforms, as it was the only thing that wouldn't be censored. People will always want and need to talk about everything in life. You can't just make some of it go away by pretending it doesn't exist entirely, but it's unfair to give the
I can't wait until the moment China completely collapses. Give it time. Give it time. Either it's gonna be cancer that kills China because of all of their shit that they are doing, or it's the people are gonna literally start just mass murdering on the streets. It's gonna be great.
impression that George Carlin was only taking aim at the left. Tons of his routines are based on the ideas and beliefs that fall square
Oh, no one cares. Anyway, that was Moon. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.